I opened the abdomen. I couldn't see anything. There's nothing wrong. The guy passed away 24 hours later. And I'm thinking, what the hell have I just done? How do you process the fact that you're cutting into human flesh? I love it. I really genuinely love it. You can never be comfortable in surgery. You need some nerves, you need some anxiety, you need some fear. If someone spouts some misinformation online and gets 10 million views, do you think the platform cares? I've had previous bosses of mine who have said a surgeon shouldn't be on social media. It's not possible. Is it a distraction? The one thing that really worries me is dementia. If someone's diagnosed with Alzheimer's in their 70s, they probably had the beginnings of it maybe in their 30s or 40s. 3 concussion events in your lifetime, that increases your risk of dementia a significant amount.
Cancer's a $1 billion industry. Are we ever going to find a magic cure-all? Are we even looking for one? Dr. Karan Rajan.
That's me.
How are you?
I'm good, man. I've got a day off today. Days off are always good for me, just to relax, do other work. Days off, never really a day off. I've got other stuff to do, so it's good to get my teeth into other things.
Day off from surgery? When you say day off?
Yeah, day off from NHS life, from surgery, from clinics, operating, seeing patients. I love all that stuff, but you need other things in your life outside of medicine. A lot of doctors, medicine is all encompassing. It can take over your life, and for many people it does. But, I need stuff outside. And
how many days a week are you in clinic as such?
So, 5 days a week, you've got a mix of things. So ward round every day. Mm-hmm. That is something that has to happen in the first thing in the morning when I get in at 8 a.m. 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. I'm usually doing a ward round of patients. And then probably twice a week there's clinic. And 2 to 3 times a week you got operating.
Wow.
It's pretty full on.
Yeah, the operating element is mind-blowing for me.
Yeah, I really enjoy that. There are some days where the operating is pretty hairy because, everyone's anatomy is different. Everyone's condition is different. It might be a tricky case. It might be their 10th operation. So they've got lots of scar tissue you need to get into. And it's scary. I was operating yesterday. I was working with my boss. We were doing a operation to remove someone's liver cancer.
Okay.
And their chest was so deep, it was so hard to find the tumor. And we couldn't see almost where we were cutting at one point. We needed to pause and be like, okay, how are we going to do this? And it was hot already. I'm gowned up. I'm stressed. I'm getting hot and sweaty because it's a difficult operation. My boss is stressing out. And I'm like,
How do you deal with that pressure? Because there's someone's life in your hands.
You know what? People sometimes ask me, how do you process the fact that you're cutting into human flesh? For me, that's never been a worry or something I've ever even thought of. Whether that's a trait of a psychopath, which, it's neither here nor there, no comment. But I love it. I really genuinely love it. And I love it. And I feel at my most surgeony, if that's a word, when there's emergencies going on. Mm-hmm. If I'm on call, someone comes in with dead bowel, because they've lost the blood supply to their bowel or it's twisted or something like that. I'm pumped. I'm like, okay, let's go and see that patient now. Let's get a CT scan. They need to be operated on. Let's get them in there. And I love that flow and it's a weird thrill. And then to fix that person at the end of the day, to see them the next day doing well, that whole circle of events is a weird thrill.
Mm-hmm. Must be very fulfilling.
It's massively fulfilling. And that's why I wanted to go into surgery. Initially, I wanted to go into orthopedic surgery because I thought, broken bone, fix it, they feel better, they walk out of the hospital. For whatever reason, I didn't really enjoy that when I got my teeth into it, but I do enjoy general surgery because it's so varied and it encompasses so many aspects of our life. Mm-hmm. Most people don't feel good unless they have a great bowel movement in the morning. It's so intrinsically tied to our lives, our gut health, constipation, diarrhea, what you're eating, indigestion. Your gallbladder's gone off, you get pains there. If your pancreas goes off, you get pains. There's so many elements. Our digestive system, I'd argue, is the most important system of organs in the body.
Really?
Yeah, it affects everything. Like people talk about now, it's quite like in vogue to talk about gut and brain health, right?
Yes.
They're linked, the gut and brain. There's crosstalk, there's bidirectional feedback between both. So, an example of this is someone with irritable bowel syndrome. A lot of people have IBS, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of the treatments for IBS is giving the patient an antidepressant. And then you think, hang on, I've got gut issues, not brain issues. Why are you giving me an antidepressant? The antidepressant is to work on the nerve cells, the kind of gut brain.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a nervous system in the gut. So the antidepressant is to act on the nervous system in the gut. And it helps with the IBS symptoms. That's pretty wild.
That is wild. I've also read a lot about stress being a factor for IBS, isn't it?
Massively. When you're stressed, there's a couple of things which happen. I mean,
I'm stressy a lot, and not outwardly, but inwardly, as in I stress a lot.
Yeah, I mean, stress
I'm
can
in a
have a number
high-pressure
of
environment.
things.
Yeah,
because if you think about what stress can do, it can increase your reflux because it can affect your lower esophageal sphincter, which is at the end of your esophagus when it joins the stomach, and it can increase the symptoms of reflux and cause heartburn. It can sometimes increase intestinal transit time, decrease intestinal transit time, which means things just run through you and you can have diarrhea. You can also get constipation with stress, and it affects so many organ systems. You see physical manifestations of stress in the form of palpitations, heart attacks, depression sometimes, or anxiety, diarrhea, abdominal pains, IBS worsened by stress. Some autoimmune conditions, in fact, many autoimmune conditions are worsened by stress. Skin conditions are worsened by stress. You can get breakouts of acne, exacerbations of psoriasis, eczema. So, stress is not just a psychological state, it's a physiological one as well.
The heartburn piece actually resonated with me because there's times when I'm going into a stressful environment and I feel like I need to burp, or I feel like I'm getting a bit of acid reflux, but I'm thinking, I haven't even eaten anything today. There's nothing going on, but that would explain what you've just said there.
Heartburn or, gastroesophageal reflux disease is like the medical terminology for that. Usually because of a number of things, but the most common thing is because of a floppy sphincter between the esophagus, the food pipe, and the stomach. So you get the contents of the stomach regurgitating, refluxing back up. It can come out sometimes. And yeah, they're pretty horrible. Like stress can exacerbate those symptoms, even if you've not eaten. And there are some dietary lifestyle changes that you can suggest for that, which has some effect. But actually, it's so insidious. Like, if you think about, going out, a lot of people take pleasure in eating.
Mm-hmm.
And if you've got reflux, there are some things which worsen your symptoms. Some of the most beautiful things in the world: spicy food, fatty foods, cheesy foods,
all the
sodas,
nice stuff.
all the nice
good
stuff. And imagine with your reflux, your doctor tells you can't have any of those. What effect is that going to have on your mental health?
Mm-hmm.
Massive impact. More stressed, worsening reflux. It's a vicious cycle.
It is indeed. Doc, let's take it. I'm going to call you Doc. You happy with that?
Do it.
I like it. It feels natural.
Yeah, do it.
Let's take it back a little bit. Talking about like the early years, your background.
So I've been a bit of a jet setter kid. So, 1990, born in Mumbai.
Okay.
India, Mumbai. And lived there for
You're
around...
2 years younger than me.
You're 35?
Yeah, I'm 88, yeah.
Yeah, so you just missed out the 90s era, the 90s kid era. But you lived through that as well, so born in Mumbai, 1990, lived there for 3 years, and then moved to Nairobi for 1 year. My uncle and dad, had a business in Nairobi, and then we moved to Hong Kong. My mum got a job there as a doctor. She was in Nairobi, then she moved there. Then we all moved to Hong Kong for 1 year. And then at the age of 5, I moved to the UK, to London.
Mm-hmm.
And the end goal of my family moving to all these places and eventually having that goal of England, London, was because they wanted me to grow up in the UK, have the UK education system molding me. Because for all its, negatives, the UK has, one of the best education systems in the world, right throughout. If you're talking like primary school, through to kind of high school, through to university, it's pretty good. And there's people internationally who come to the UK for that purpose. When I was at uni at Imperial, I had students from Singapore, Malaysia, everywhere coming there to study. So it's pretty cool. So they wanted that for me. And I was pretty privileged in that my parents worked hard, doing a couple of jobs here and there to put me through one of the best schools in the country, and then put, through Imperial. So, I had it all growing up, and that's, we're here now.
So the doctor piece, you becoming a doctor, because I always find it interesting when someone's like a lawyer, a doctor, some of these,
Yeah.
growing up, I'm a Turkish background, as I told you earlier. So naturally, Turkish families are the same. Son, go to university and be a doctor, go to university and be a lawyer. And you've actually done that. You've moved here, you've gone to uni and you've become a doctor, which is incredible. But I always look at like how people become doctors, and generally their family, mum or dad is a doctor, and they tend to follow in that route. And you just said there that your mum was a doctor.
Mum's a doctor. She's a hematologist, so deals with like blood-related disorders, haemophilia, things like that. And interestingly enough, even though I heard stories about patients, about hospital life from her, and that excited me, oh, wow, you're doing all of these wild things with patients, and, you're treating these wonderful diseases, weird and wonderful things. I was like, wow, I need to do that as well. But she always discouraged me from becoming a doctor. She's like, don't do it. Right.
Really?
But my dad was obsessed with the fact that I had to be a doctor. And I think overall my parents did sort of push me in that direction. Even though my mum said, oh, don't be a doctor, when it came to it, she would support me and say, okay, you need to do this, you need to do this. She helped me out with work experience at work and all these things. But yeah, it's a very Indian, Asian thing, and, kind of ethnic thing for, people in our culture. You need to do those standard professions, accountant, lawyer, doctor, engineer. And so, I fell into that, dogma of feeling I had to become a doctor. And I chose sciences. I was good at sciences at school. But interestingly, for my A-levels, I really liked English literature. My English teacher said, you know what, you should do English A-level. I quite enjoyed art. My art teacher said, I see you as my protege. You should do art A-level. And I'd be really annoyed if you didn't do art. And I really enjoyed languages. So I speak Hindi, Tamil, English, and German. I'm trying to learn Spanish now. I did German for A-level because I really enjoyed German, and I was getting like fluent in it. And that was a foregone conclusion that I would do it. But I didn't have space to do those other art in English, as well as chemistry, physics, maths, biology, and all these things, which I needed for medicine.
Mm-hmm.
So for a lot of, people, what would I have done if I didn't do medicine? Maybe languages. I don't know. Like, there's so many other parts of me which I feel has been taken away because medicine occupies a huge presence in my life.
I was going to ask you if you weren't a doctor, what would you be?
A traveling chef. Because I like eating food and languages and culture. I'd have done that, I reckon.
Traveling chef.
Traveling food critic. Because I'm a better eater than I am a food maker, yeah.
I'm a good eater.
Yeah, I love it. It's
I
culture.
love food.
We love
I love food.
Yeah.
What led then, you touched on it earlier, but what kind of led on to become a surgeon in the sector that you were in, as opposed to a different sector within?
So the specific type of surgery that I do. So like I said, initially when I got into the world of medicine, I thought, even as a medical student, I was thinking, I really want to do orthopedic surgery. Mm-hmm. And orthopedic surgery is all to do with bones. And I don't know why I was obsessed with this. I think it sort of goes back to my childhood when I was in India visiting my grandparents on summer holidays and stuff. One of my grandma, my mother's side, she lived next door to these neighbors, and they were close family friends actually. And one of the daughters of the neighbor, she had this spinal deformity where it affected her growth, and it was horrible seeing her in this like weird brace, and she was limited in her mobility and what she could do, playing with other children and stuff. She was a few years younger than me. And I kind of said, I made like a little pledge to her, this between me and her, that, you know what, I'm going to grow up, I'm going to become a spine surgeon, which is, in orthopedic training, I'm going to fix your spine. And that was one of the things. I'm going to do surgery, I'm going to do medicine, I'm going to do that. I mean, she got sorted out in surgery years before I ever became a doctor. And then I did orthopedics for a year. I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't enjoy the culture. It was a very laddie culture, like very privileged culture. male dominated, white male dominated where I was as well. And I felt, I felt ostracized. I felt excluded from that kind of group. But general surgery, which is what I'm in right now, I had a couple of mentors there who really took me under their wing, showed me the ropes, and I really enjoyed it as well. And I think that's key. Whatever aspect of business, life, career, sport, you need a mentor at every level. Even if you're the highest level athlete, if you're Usain Bolt, Roger Federer at his peak, Novak Djokovic, you need someone to not put you in your place, but tell you, you can still improve, mate. Even when I'm operating right now, say there's an operation I can do that I'm absolutely happy doing, a hernia operation or removing someone's gallbladder. Even if I feel I'm at the top of my game in that, I want someone even more senior than me who's done it many times before just to say, I think you could do better. You could do this. You could do that. You need that constant
drive,
criticism and drive to be like, I thought that was pretty good. You telling me I can do better? Okay, fuck it. Yeah, I can.
Keeps you grounded, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Keeps you humble is important.
Especially in surgery, you need that. You can never be comfortable in surgery.
Really?
The day you feel comfortable in doing something in surgery is the day you take it for granted, is the day your reflexes are slightly subdued and you can make an injury. You need some nerves, you need some anxiety, you need some fear when you're operating. Any operation, when I'm scrubbing up and washing my hands, I've got a little few seconds of panic and shiver that just goes through me, like, I'm about to do something to someone. They're asleep. They put their trust in me. I can't fuck this up. And that just kind of, improves my focus and reflexes. And it's that respect,
How many years have you been surgeon now?
So 10 years as a doctor, 6 years as a surgeon.
And you still get that excitement?
Absolutely.
Every time?
I love it. When I'm scrubbing up and just before I'm about to put my gloves on, I've got 2 minutes where I'm just scrubbing, it's a bit cathartic and I'm just planning, okay, what am I going to do? How am I going to
visualize
start?
the op then?
You visualize the operation. I'm doing that before, but now it's almost, it's visceral. I'm about to do it now. Okay, how do I start? What's my first thing? Okay, what if this happens? What am I going to do? If I need help, who am I going to call? I'm looking at the eventualities. They're all playing in my head, almost like, that scene in Queen's Gambit. Have you seen it?
Yeah,
where she sees the chess pieces on the board. I'm sort of seeing the different outcomes. Like, if I do that, that could happen. If I do this, this could happen. I need to do this. After that, do this. I'm playing out multiple possibilities and a tree of different events. And I need to find the best route. And I'm doing that in the 2 minutes. I can't explain it, but it just happens subconsciously in the 2 minutes. And so when I'm there, facing the patient, about to cut into them, I'm as confident as I'll ever be.
Wow. You're like a problem solver.
In some ways, yeah. But I mean, I don't want to paint out that I'm this kind of savant or something. I'm not. It's experience, it's repetition, it's getting things wrong and then learning from mistakes as well sometimes.
I was smiling because it kind of resonated with me that playing a load of outcomes in your head before making a decision. I think that's transferable in a lot of skills in life, a lot of different sort of trades in life. I do the same. When we're making a decision and it's high pressure, important decision, I do something very similar in my head. I almost very quickly, within a split second, and subconsciously, as you said, try every route and see which way it ends up, and then pick one. And you can stay quite calm with it. I imagine you have to stay calm. You can't be flapping around in the middle of surgery. You have to stay calm, even if you don't feel like it inside.
I mentioned before, about being a surgeon and doing some of these high-risk procedures. Sometimes there's a psychopathic trait. In psychopathy, someone who's a psychopath, even a psychopath has some desirable traits. And one of the most common desirable traits that a psychopath has is they can keep cool under pressure. And it's been noted in the literature and by psychologists that people in high pressure jobs and situations, so you're a firefighter, you're a pilot, you're a CEO of a big enterprise, if you're a surgeon at extremes of life, you need to have that calmness under pressure, because if some major bleeding happens and you start panicking and you're not calm, that does not help you and that does not help the patient at the end of the line. So having that psychopathic trait is desirable where you can keep calm. But obviously psychopaths can't switch it on and off but surgeons in these high pressure positions, you can switch it on and off when the situation demands it.
It's almost like removing your humanity, having no emotion.
You
I
have
think to stay calm.
You have to.
In those situations.
You got to be cold in that situation. You know, the warmth comes and the empathy comes when you're breaking bad news, when you're dealing with families, when you're explaining something difficult to a patient. Unfortunately, as part of my job, I do have to tell patients that they've got cancer. I've got to tell them the worst thing they'll ever hear in their lives.
So are you the first person that tells them?
Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes.
Wow.
You know, if someone comes in and they've not opened their bowels for 10 days, all right, and they've got abdominal pain and they're vomiting, I'll get a CT scan, for example. The CT scan shows they've got a bowel cancer. And that bowel cancer may be inoperable. Maybe it's already perforated, it's exploded, and it's kind of seeded everywhere. I'm going to tell them. You know, this is what's going on, and we may not be able to operate. And, you know, that is the unfortunate reality of my job. That's not always the case, but I might have to tell them they've got pancreatic cancer. And in most cases, pancreatic cancer, cancer of the pancreas, that is sometimes inoperable because it's already spread when you start to get symptoms. I mean, the 5-year mortality, the 5-year survival is poor. You know, it's sort of 10, 12%. Sometimes less. So yeah, sometimes I give the worst news in the world and I need to show that warmth and empathy because I am the person the patient will lean on for emotional support.
How do you deal with that mentally? When you go home at night, when you've told someone they got less than 6 months left to live, what do? How do you decompress?
You know, it's interesting. I didn't have any strategies or system in place for dealing with that in my first year as a doctor. Dealing with life and death, breaking bad news, dealing with troubles with colleagues. I didn't have an outlet or anything I could do in my first year as a doctor. I didn't have a mentor. If I was doing CPR on a patient and the patient died, how do I deal with the trauma of losing someone, losing a patient I was looking after? So all of that, I didn't know how to deal with. And that manifested as me having insomnia, having kind of low-grade anxiety. Because, you know, everything's fine at home. I'm happy with my parents. I'll be in a relationship or things are going well. But why have I still got this anxiety? I'm a doctor. Things are going well for me. And it was that. And it was only later when I had a mentor and he'd be like, do you want to talk about stuff? Or, you know, what's going on in your life? Do you want to talk about stuff? Talking was a form of catharsis and getting it out there. And then I realized, you know, hang on. All of these micro stresses and macro stresses, seeing people die. I mean, let's not underestimate the psychological toll that can have. Will then leach into my own psychology and mental state and have these insidious effects. Now I've got systems in place. Thankfully as a surgeon right now, I'm not having to deal with too many cardiac arrests.
Okay.
Because I operate on patients and they go home usually. They'll have complications sometimes and I may need to take them back to theatre. But it's more of a medical issue on the medical ward. You see patients who are 80, 90, 70 have cardiac arrests. So when I used to do medicine, I used to see a lot of that. It's been maybe about 6 months or so since I had a last patient who had a cardiac arrest that I had to pump their chest and give chest compressions. Even with that, the patient unfortunately passed away. How did I deal with it? I went home and I spent time with my dog, went to the gym, spoke to one of my mates who's nothing to do with medicine, but just talking about my day, talking about his day. And, you know, it's a slow process where I just unload. And it's sort of like doing a podcast. You talk to someone, you know?
Yeah, I always just think about that. We're funny creatures as humans, aren't we? You know, that kind of, could I have done more? That piece in your head. I always think about that in my world, let alone what it must be like in your world, as in just in general. I help people a lot. When I go and see my counsellor, my therapist, the woman I speak to, she always says to me, Ty, you can't save everyone. Like, you can't help everyone. It's not your job. You know, you need to look after yourself first and foremost. And that's, hypothetically speaking, you're genuinely in that chair. Like,
I've heard of some doctors in America and sometimes in the UK talk of something almost as a joke called the 1,000-patient stare, right? And that is someone who's very experienced, who's done several years as a doctor or healthcare professional, who has seen thousands of patients, who has seen probably, you know, dozens and dozens of deaths and hundreds of complications and genuinely horrible things. The 1,000 patient stare is that accumulation of all the trauma and all the horrible badness that you've seen over a number of years accumulated, and it desensitizes that healthcare professional from any more trauma. Your skin is so thick. You're made of adamantium. You are Wolverine. Like, you almost feel that nothing else can shock you into feeling emotion. And that is a natural defense mechanism because you don't want to keep seeing trauma and then keep being affected by it. Imagine every time you saw a patient who had a complication, you literally crumbled inside. You can't. You need to be the watchman. You need to be strong. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it happens. You desensitize emotionally to some degree.
I've heard of a similar term with some of my ex-military friends. They say the same. Once you've been to war so much, you I
can only imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very similar. How do you go from being a surgeon to kind of, I hate the word, but like influencer, kind of online YouTuber, TikToker, you make amazing videos. Like, I love watching your videos because I feel like it takes quite difficult subjects to get your head around within the health sector and you put it into real layman's terms for the average Joe to understand. It's really informative. I learned quite a lot from them. I trust you that what you're saying is true. But
yes. That would be the biggest conspiracy.
Yeah. But how do you go from kind of NHS surgeon to that? Because they almost seem worlds apart. Well, they are worlds apart.
Yeah. I mean, in some aspects, it does seem worlds apart. But I would say a lot of what I do in the hospital, if I'm seeing a patient in the clinic, I want to explain things to them as simply as I can. If I'm consenting them for an operation to have their gallbladder out, I can't throw out jargon like, you'll have a common bile duct injury, you'll get a thromboembolism afterwards. If this happens, you might have a biliary reconstruction. If this happens,
sounds overwhelming.
It's overwhelming. So I need to explain to them, this is what we're going to do. If you have surgery, you're at higher risk of blood clots to the legs or lungs. Sometimes if it's challenging via keyhole approach, we might make a slightly bigger cut here. I need to really not dumb it down, but explain it in non-medical terms as closely as I can. And, social media came at a time for me when there was lots of misinformation around COVID and the COVID pandemic, the vaccines and all these things. And that's when I really took up the chalice of debunking not only COVID-related misinformation, but general health misinformation. That was its own pandemic in its own right, people promoting all sorts of weird and wonderful things. And I've been on YouTube since 2012, so I've been doing it well before, the last few years.
I didn't realize you've been doing it that long.
Yeah, that was different type of content. It was sort of, I was making how-to examination videos, like how to do a blood pressure reading, how to do an abdominal examination, how to listen to someone's lungs, how to do an ECG. So that was really directed at medical professionals. But I realized actually I don't need to help medical professionals. I need to help the general public improve their health literacy. The health literacy of the UK is something around age 12.
Really?
Yeah, the adult health literacy. About age 12 or even below, possibly, in some areas.
Why do you think that is?
Well, depending on the area we're talking about, obviously, there's not always equality in access to education, higher education, right? And there's a lot of maybe vocabulary or things you learn in higher education. Exposure to medical professionals using jargon and never explaining things in lay terms, in non-medical terms. And general, not a huge concern about your own health and well-being. So it's multiple factors, top-down factors from government level and medical professional level, but also bottom-up levels from the individual themselves wanting to take ownership of their health. And the relationship between healthcare worker and patient. That's important.
Yeah.
So improving their health literacy is doing things like making it more fun, maybe the way I do it. In talking about constipation or hemorrhoids, I made a video about hemorrhoids. How do you, I think a video about hemorrhoids I did got 2 million views. You never think it, but you need to make it accessible and engaging. And you can't be talking about, you can't read from an NHS website and be like, the risk factors for hemorrhoids include, who has time for that?
How does the NHS accept that? You're representing them effectively. You're a surgeon of the NHS and you're doing these videos, extracurricular videos. Do they care? Do they moan? Do they?
I'll tell you something. There's a lot of people in the NHS who value what I do. In fact, I've worked with the NHS before. I've worked with them on raising awareness of the bowel cancer screening program. You know, the little stool sample tests that are sent home when you hit a certain age 50 plus, and they do the stool test to screen for bowel cancer or blood. I've worked with them with that and various other things. I've worked with the Royal College of Surgeons. That's my professional body. So, you know, clearly there's a lot of interest and they like what I do. I'm credible. I'm an active professional on the front line. So it works hand in hand. And even people day to day I work with, nurses on the ward, other doctors, my juniors, my seniors, they also, a lot of them, it's positive feedback. There are some people who are maybe, you know, we'll say they're maybe dinosaurs.
Mm-hmm.
They are not accepting of social media. They don't understand. I've had previous bosses of mine who have said a surgeon shouldn't be on social media. You know, shouldn't be doing this. How do you have time for surgery and social media? It's not possible. Is it a distraction? But there's no proof. They've even said to myself, is it a distraction? I feel it's a distraction, but I can't prove it. Why are you saying it then? How are you saying things without proof? We're in a profession that demands evidence and you're just using your opinions, not facts or data. How can you say that to me? And I'm doing so much good according to other people. So yes and no.
They almost probably feel threatened because they don't understand it.
They don't understand it.
We fear the unknown as humans, don't we?
I'm trying to change it, but it will take some time.
It's funny you said about the timepiece because I spin a lot of plates. And when I was looking at the overview the guys did, general surgeon in the NHS, obviously YouTuber, sharing ideas on health, author of This Book May Save Your Life. Podcast host yourself and a lecturer at Sunderland Uni. I mean, how are you finding time to do all of that, be a surgeon, and also the most time-consuming thing in the world is creating content?
Yeah.
Those videos you create with the overlays.
Oh man.
I appreciate how hard that is and how much time it takes. How do you juggle all of it?
You know what? So it was easy at the beginning when I didn't have so many fingers in so many pies, when I just had a TikTok account and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
It was fine. And even then it was become difficult. But now posting on all of these different social channels, it is time consuming, but I tell myself every day I will put 1 to 2 hours away, at least 1 hour for social media.
Got you.
And I think the value for me and the easy thing for me is a lot of my content is health, science, and medicine, which on the one hand, I need to make sure is accurate, but also it's right up my street. So I don't have to, you know, research a hell of a lot about a story or anything like that. If I see a video that's ridiculous, talking about, you know, you need to do this, you need to eat this and do this for your gut health. You know, I think, no, you don't. You need to do this. And I already know. And I just need a few minutes to kind of do a brief script in my head so it sounds nice and succinct and it can fit in 45 or 60 seconds. So that stuff's easy for me. The editing takes time.
Yeah.
More than the content creation, coming up with the idea. And for me, I'm not a fancy editor. I do everything on mobile apps. So I could do it on the go. Like I was getting the train into London today to meet you. Mm-hmm. Had 45 minutes on the train. I was editing something in that 45 minutes.
What are you using? What app are you using?
CapCut.
Yeah.
Everything, mate. I even edited one YouTube video on CapCut.
It's banging, isn't it?
Banging. Changed the game for me, to be honest.
Bro, in your opinion, what's the biggest health crisis at the moment?
That's a good one. There's a number of things. There is a number of things. I want to say, listen, when I was beginning medicine, I was in fear to some degree of cancer, right? I was worried about the idea of cancer. A few years ago, it was 1 in 3 people in a lifetime will develop cancer. Now it's 1 in 2. So all of these facts, I was thinking, wow, someone in your family, my friends or family, myself, yeah, us too in this room, one of us may get cancer. And I was thinking, you know, that is shocking. But then spending time in surgery and over the last couple of years, you see all the amazing advancements in diagnostics, therapeutics, screening, surgical techniques. And you think actually for many people, cancer is highly treatable and highly curable. Bowel cancer, breast cancer, skin cancer. But something which is, you know, insidiously grown in the background of my mind, which is now coming to the forefront, and it really worries me. It's the one thing that really worries me is dementia and
Really?
brain conditions. And I feel that is like literally a hidden silent pandemic, because dementia and neurodegeneration, the kind of atrophy and degeneration of the brain, that happens decades before it becomes clinically obvious that someone's got an issue. If someone's diagnosed with Alzheimer's in their 70s, they probably had the beginnings of it maybe in their 30s or 40s, right?
Wow.
So it's the habits we do now in terms of our brain health which can safeguard us in the future. I'm not saying that you can do everything perfectly now and you may still develop Alzheimer's, but you can reduce the risk of that by basic things which we all know, or many people already talk about, making sure that you avoid long periods of sleep deprivation and chronic sleep deprivation. Making sure you exercise. It's useful for your brain as well. Having those kind of regular social contacts, diet, all of these things. But, a lot of us, we don't do that. And actually within the subcategory of dementia, CTE, traumatic encephalopathy, is rugby players, sports players, footballers who are heading the ball all the time.
Boxers have that.
NFL, boxers. That trauma of your brain moving around like a pinball in its bony cage every time it knocks something, that, what percentage of, these sports players who have to use their head in sport develop degeneration of the brain more so than the average person in their 50s, 60s, and 70s? I'd be interested. We'd never be able to know, because we'd have to kind of like almost autopsy their brain to see what's happened. I would wager it's a big number.
Would you change your career path to go into that element?
I wouldn't, but I would like to advocate for it more.
Okay.
Like, it's controversial, but I don't think young kids should be, heading the ball.
Really?
Yeah, I don't think so.
So you're pro touch rugby then, as if they're young?
Yeah, I mean, listen, you can always do whatever you want in life. Who cares? Why listen to me? I'm just a random guy. But my kid, I wouldn't want them to be, heading the ball all the time if they're going to football practice, like constantly heading the ball, like 10 times a game. And they're playing a game every Saturday. And it's, I've played football when I was younger. It can be quite forceful. Corner comes in or someone like kicks the ball at you and you head it, you do feel like a little
judder.
You're like, oh, okay, I feel. Doing that dozens of times in practice, games, geez, I don't know what the impact of that will be. There was a study, actually. It was a large study done. I'm failing to remember where it was done, but essentially, if you have 3 concussion events in your lifetime, that increases your risk of dementia a significant amount.
Really?
Just 3 concussion events.
Which is quite easy to do.
Yeah, and one significant...
In your lifetime, you're saying, not in a year?
In your lifetime.
That must be quite common, no? 3 concussion.
Concussion events is huge. You can get that in one season playing in football. You can get that in one season playing in the NFL. People's careers are ended based on, one head injury.
I mean, the cancer thing you said earlier is the one that is in my head always.
Yeah.
Like, it's just one of them ones where I feel like you're fine today and tomorrow someone's like, you got 6 months left. That just, it's quite frightening when you think of it like that.
Oh, absolutely. When I'm having these discussions with patients and telling them about these things, there are a lot of, I would say there's certain types of cancer which still fill me with absolute dread. Like pancreatic cancer would be one, that we've said the 5-year survival is around the 10% mark, which is terrible. And that figure has not changed for decades.
Why?
Because we still haven't figured out a way to identify pancreatic cancer early. Because, when you start getting symptoms, so pancreatic cancer symptoms, you start getting jaundice, nausea, vomiting, chronic abdominal pain. It's probably too late. You've already got metastasis. It's spread to other places, and then it might be inoperable, and your prognosis is abysmal. But actually, when it's growing, when you've got pancreatic cancer, say I've got pancreatic cancer right now, it's asymptomatic. I'm fine. I don't have any symptoms. But how do we screen? You might even have a CT scan and it may not pick it up because CT scans are not 100% sensitive at looking at the pancreas for slight changes. What do you do then? Do you have to biopsy everyone's pancreas every year? No, because that could increase the risk of causing pancreatitis, causing bleeding, causing death. How do you do that? But there are innovative things being done at the moment. Like, for example, Stanford were recently involved, or either Harvard or Stanford, in a new AI enhanced model where they can predict someone's lifetime risk of pancreatic cancer. And they've done that with hundreds of thousands of patients in Denmark and a US cohort as well,
Wow.
using AI to look at the patient's medical notes and history to work out their risk of pancreatic cancer. And if they're high risk, maybe then they go for a biopsy or screening. So there are innovative things coming out, but there are those cancers which are horrible.
Would you rather know or not know? If someone said to you now, I could tell you how many years you got left to live, or what you're going to die of, or this and that, would you rather know or not know in the trade you're in?
Me being me, I'd want to know. And there are blood tests that are coming out into the market. Well, we already have blood tests which can, pick out various cancers that you may have.
Yeah, I think I've heard of these.
But there is a blood test which is not widely available. It's been created by a lab in India. I'm trying to think of the lab. I did a video on this, but essentially they are looking for these sort of embryonic components of cells, of the stem cells, which are produced in association with cancer. And it can tell you your risk of developing certain types of cancers. And it can tell you, I just take a blood test from you. Oh, you've got, you're at risk of colorectal cancer. And then you go into a screening program. But then you can argue you don't have cancer now. It's just telling you that in X number of years, you will develop colorectal cancer. So you've got several years of just anxiety and worry, and you're going through all these invasive tests, which in itself may fuck you up. Me being me, I probably would want to know. But again, that you're burdening yourself with anxiety.
For sure.
Like, patients who've got Huntington's disease, right? Or like a brain disease.
Yeah.
That runs in the family. So you've got the gene for Huntington's. So you know that you are going to end up that way. So you could be in your, teens and 20s and you are going to end up like that. That's horrible. Knowing that you will.
If you live long enough.
If you live long enough. That's pretty horrible. And that's almost like knowing, that's the same thing. It's knowing you've got cancer, knowing that is your future.
I mean, it's controversial, but cancer's a $1 billion industry? You know what I'm going to say?
I know what you're getting into.
Are we ever going to find a magic cure-all?
Yeah,
Are we even looking for one? All these researchers going on, whether they're charities, whether they're, in different universities, are we looking for a system to be able to identify it early so it never becomes a problem, so we don't have to spend millions in treating it?
So that's the holy grail of cancer, right? The holy grail of cancer treatment is being able to stop it developing in the first place, not treating it. And I see the concern of many people thinking, oh, we'll never find a cure for cancer because then the pharmaceutical companies won't make money. Doctors can't make money because it's the treatment of cancer and the side effects of cancer where doctors earn money. Now, a lot of flaws in that argument is that, obviously, number one, cancer is an entity. It's not one singular disease. It's an umbrella term for hundreds and hundreds of completely different diseases. The biology of breast cancer is completely different to the biology of liver cancer, to muscle-invasive bladder cancer, to penile cancer. All completely different, have completely different treatment modalities. Prostate cancer, for example, there's a meta-analysis of studies which have suggested that, for certain types of prostate cancer, there's actually no significant survival benefit between a radical prostatectomy, you're using a robot to remove someone's cancer, versus watchful waiting. There's no difference in that, because most people die with prostate cancer than from it.
Got you.
Unless it metastasizes and spreads to your bones, then, that's pretty horrible and whatever. But again, it's different diseases, so we've got different therapies for different things. Now, there are newer technologies coming in, immunotherapy, which can target specific proteins on cancers, which can just kill it. There's CAR T therapy, where you can train your T cells. I can take your T cells, which are one of your white cells, which do the kind of heavy-duty bouncer job of killing bad cancers and viruses in your body. I can take some of your T cells out of your body, train them in a lab, like Marines, to fight cancer and identify cancer, and then infuse them back into your body, and they are now cancer ninjas. They can fuck up those cancer cells. That's CAR T cell therapy. And that's actually cured leukemia and lymphoma in some patients. You know, in a young girl recently, it cured that using CAR T cell therapy in the UK. So
Wow.
we've got a lot of interesting things. And these, you know, a lot of people who go into cancer research, why do they do that? They may know someone with cancer. They may have cancer themselves, or they are genuinely invested in, you know, contributing to the cure of cancers in general.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there is no conspiracy from a medical side of things that we don't want to find that cure. We do. You know, CRISPR, you know, genetic therapy, genetic manipulation. Is that a viable therapy for certain types of cancers? So I think we're slowly getting towards a place where we're finding certain things. You know, I'll give you one last example. The New England Journal of Medicine, there was a small cohort of patients, I think it was around 16 patients, with a type of rectal cancer.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't have chemotherapy, they didn't have radiotherapy, they didn't have surgery. They were given a type of monoclonal antibody called dostarlimab, right? It's a type of checkpoint inhibitor. It sort of acts on, certain proteins. And it cured these patients of rectal cancer just by having that medication. No surgery, no chemotherapy. It cured those 16 patients.
Wow. Okay. You're giving me a bit of confidence there then.
Yeah, I'm confident reading these things as well. But the difference is when you hear these things, I make videos about cancer trials and therapies and all these things. You know, people think, oh, we hear about them, then we don't hear about them ever again. Someone's been killed. The person who rented it has been killed. The FBI or whatever. You know, we'll probably never hear from the doctor again. The doctor's going to be killed. Don't write this. You know, if he disappears, we know, whatever. But the thing is, a lot of these things are in trials. Going from trial to widespread use is many years. There's a lag time.
It's meant to be many years.
Yeah.
Many years.
It can be, though, because we then need to test those cancer therapies, which are completely brand new. There's no background history. So it can take years for testing, efficacy in humans. Does it work long-term for cancer resolution? So it can take a time.
You make these videos online, but obviously one of the reasons why I enjoy watching yours is you're a qualified professional.
I am indeed.
I hope so. There's an element of kind of actual real knowledge and lived experience in those. But there's a lot of people online, health gurus and influencers that are peddling all sorts of shit. I mean, some of them got bigger followings than you and people believe in it. I mean, this is dangerous, isn't it? Do you think at some point they need to be governed? They need to be like a governing body of what information we're spreading? Because obviously social media platforms try and do it, but now, whenever you see a social media platform say this has been fact checked, you believe it even more because there's some mad conspiracy that they're trying to hide everything.
So first of all, I think people should be banned making videos in supermarkets. That's the number one thing, right? Especially topless.
Why? 'Cause it's distracting you.
No, but you see these people in supermarkets just picking up random things off the shelf, reading out a list of chemicals, which sounds scary. But the truth is, if I read out the list of chemicals in an orange or blueberries or an apple, you know, there would be a lot of weird chemicals in there because everything is a chemical. Mm-hmm. Our bodies are made of chemicals, you know. Water is dihydrogen monoxide. That sounds fucking scary.
It does sound,
Look at me,
like
I'm drinking dihydrogen monoxide. Yeah. Am I going to die? Water intoxication. If you have 5 liters of water in half an hour, you'll die. There's ways. You can take truths, massage them, and manipulate them so the same truth becomes something scary and horrible. Mm-hmm. It's psychological manipulation. Mm-hmm. These people that you see making pseudoscientific videos, fear-mongering videos, they're trying to sell something, a course, a supplement, or just trying to garner, views and likes. Because trauma porn and fear-mongering goes much more viral than science and sanity. Right? So that's what a lot of these people do. In terms of regulation, as a doctor in the UK, I will be regulated as to what I say. If I say something obviously bullshit, right? Hey guys, drink this orange juice mixture, which will cure your cancer. And I can guarantee that because I'm a surgeon, I'm a cancer doctor, I've dealt with cancers before. Do this and you'll have your cancer cured. I will be struck off if I say shit like that.
There is people saying it though. They might not be doctors.
In the UK. It's not so highly regulated in America because it's more of a privatized system. They have boards and, American board of whatever, but I don't know how stringent they are. And if you're not a doctor, if you're just an influencer, who's going to stop you? It's not a police matter.
That's what I'm saying though. Like, where does that responsibility lie? Who can look after those people? Because
no one.
They're reaching millions of people at home.
The truth is, you know, if someone spouts some misinformation online and gets 10 million views, do you think the platform cares? They love it. It's 10 million views. That's controversy. And there's going to be people like me who will respond to that video and it may also get some views. So they love that discourse. And their line will be, you know, freedom of speech, we can allow things like this, and they won't target that thing because for them, it means more views, more time spent on the platform by people, more advertising money that they can get from advertisers wanting to, you know, pour their adverts on the platform. So it's a money spinning game for them. They don't care about, truly, they don't care about misinformation.
No, you're right. Sad, really.
That's the reality.
Let's go back to surgery. I wanted to ask something earlier, but I forgot. If I said to you, go back to one particular incident where there's a complication, where you're in a really hairy situation, the worst one, what comes to your mind? Is there that many?
I'm just trying to think. I mean, I wouldn't say this is a complication as such, but there's a patient I saw on a night shift a number of years ago now. He's from Africa. He wasn't even like a resident in the UK. I think he was visiting his daughter or something. You know, not even that old. I think he was in his 40s or something. He came in and I was told by someone, by the A&E doctors, that he'd got pancreatitis, an inflammation of his pancreas. And I thought, okay. But actually, when I examined him, I was like, this is not pancreatitis. You are pretty unwell. I got a CT scan on him. The CT scan confirmed my suspicions that he had some dead bowel and he had a hole in his bowel as well. From what? I don't know, because he had no other medical conditions. And I called my boss at the time, you know, overnight. And I said, this guy's pretty unwell. I think he needs an operation. And then my boss looked at the scans from home and took my story and said, yeah, I agree. Get started. I'll come and join you. It's about 2 a.m. now.
Wow.
We took him to the operating room all pretty quickly. You know, our boss was still coming in. And sort of I opened the abdomen, quick, trying to get inside. Went inside. It's now 3 a.m. I couldn't see anything. I couldn't see anything. There's nothing wrong. There's no hole. There's no shit leaking into the abdomen. There's no dead bowel. There's no bleeding. There's no pus. There's no infection. There's no abnormality that I'm seeing right now. And I'm thinking, what the hell have I just done? You know, we call that a negative laparotomy, where a laparotomy is when you cut someone open and you have a look in their insides. Negative means no findings, no abnormalities. You don't want to have negative laparotomies because you've just opened someone for, you know, no reason. But this guy was unstable. He was deteriorating rapidly. When I saw him in the emergency room, he was still speaking to me, although in a lot of pain. By the time he got into the anesthetic room a few hours later, he was delirious. He was confused because he was deteriorating. You know, his infection markers were through the roof. We don't know what was going on. I looked every quadrant of the abdomen. I couldn't find anything. My boss joined me and he said, okay, good, you're in. He had a look as well, thorough look inside. Nothing, spotless. We were like, what the hell is going on? And it is clearly abdominal because the scan showed that there was a hole in dead bowel. And we looked at it. It's not just a report from the radiologist that says that. We analyzed the scans ourselves and it said, yes, that looks like that thing. And so we closed up. We literally, you know, we've got 3 opinions now because we called in another senior person to come in and have a look who's not even on call. He came in because it was such a weird case. Nothing wrong. We closed up. The guy passed away 24 hours later and there was no obvious cause. We don't know why. And we had various theories. We discussed this in our meeting. We have these morbidity and mortality meetings every month where we analyze interesting cases, weird cases, complications and deaths. And obviously we had to do a root cause analysis of this case. Why did he die? What happened? What could we have done better? What was the learning points? And we discussed this and everyone was just gobsmacked. They were like, yeah, that scan looks like he's got dead bowel and he's got a hole in the bowel. He needed an operation from everything there. But we found nothing. And then he passed away just because he kept deteriorating. And I still don't know what happened to this day.
Never got to the bottom of it?
No one did. It would, obviously, because it was a...
Is that quite rare?
Very rare. Because for something like that unique, they would then have a coroner's inquest.
Yeah.
You know, because he's died within 24 hours of being, 40 hours of being in the hospital. Nothing. Coroner couldn't find anything either. So I don't know what happened. And sometimes in medicine, weird shit happens.
Doesn't make sense.
You don't know what happens, which solidifies the point that we don't know anything. We really don't know much about life, the human body, anything.
I was just having a look here because the guys have written some health myths and questions, and some of them I know you've done some wicked videos on. Oh, God. Is Diet Coke cancerous?
No.
Straight no.
There is like, I know recently the IARC, WHO classification put it as a possible carcinogen, I believe was the phrase they used. If you look at the number of things that are possible carcinogens, they've also got fermented foods, things like kimchi, pickled vegetables, which are great for your gut health.
Yeah, they're promoted as good for you.
Yeah, and if your gut health is good, you'll have a lower risk of bowel cancer. So it's anti-carcinogenic. So it doesn't make sense to do that. And, I think if you look at it from a purely statistical point of view, yeah, many things in life are possible carcinogens. Our environment right now that we're inside, every day we're walking around, there are microplastics floating in the air that we're inhaling. They are possibly carcinogenic as well.
And also, what's the statistic that it needs to be deemed as possibly carcinogenic? It might just be like 0.000.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at the doses, right? If you're smashing 100 Diet Cokes a day and your cumulative risk of cancer from that may be slightly increased if you're having 100 of something a day, but that will be the same for anything. If you're having 200 loaves of bread a day, might increase your risk of cancer and various other things.
Is vaping as dangerous as smoking?
My position on this has somewhat changed. And I would argue that in science, things change and you need to adapt your views as well. My view years ago was that I would have thought that vaping was safer than smoking. And things are relative. They're both bad and I wouldn't encourage either.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone is a smoker and they quit smoking and then went on to vaping, I would say that would probably be safer than continuing smoking. And for many people, that would probably still make sense.
Yeah.
If someone is not a smoker or a vapor and they pick up vaping thinking, it's not got any tobacco and it's fine, that is also terrible. There are some studies which have come out which suggest actually there are risks specific to vaping which may not be found in smoking, and they're probably equally bad. Vaping is bad, full stop, and I don't think we can even compare the two. You shouldn't smoke, clearly. You shouldn't vape. Now, that's easy for me to say, but the underlying problem with smoking and vaping is that people are addicted to it. You can't just tell them on your high horse, you need to stop smoking. I tell patients all the time, listen, if you're having surgery, I would ideally like you to stop smoking because it's going to improve your recovery, improve your wound healing, and lower the risk of complications and make you a lower risk for a general anesthetic. Well, obviously, you've got to...
Smoking has all of those risks?
Absolutely. If I'm operating on a patient and I'm making big cuts in them, smoking reduces tissue perfusion and the blood and the oxygen reaching the tissues.
The nicotine?
The vasoconstriction effect of the nicotine.
Okay.
And chemicals in the tobacco, dozens and dozens of various chemicals. That's going to worsen wound healing. That's going to increase risk of infections, increase risk of wound breakdown. It's going to increase your risk of picking up chest infections after an anesthetic. It's going to lower your mobility, increase your risk of blood clots because smoking makes your blood more viscous, more thick.
Mm-hmm.
So you can have more blood clots to the legs or lungs. So all of these things, and especially elderly patients who are smokers, I'm like, you should. And that should be part of prehabilitation. And prehabilitation is actually optimizing a patient for surgery. How do you optimize a patient for surgery? Making sure they start doing some resistance activities, walking, improve their stamina and cardio fitness, stopping smoking, controlling their blood sugar, improving their microbiome and their diet. A lot of these things are huge factors which can improve their outcome from surgery. We're talking you can leave hospital in half the time potentially. You can not avoid wound infections. Yeah, we need to do these things.
I had no idea that
massive.
The effects of that.
Massive.
You just think of lung cancer and throat cancer.
Even if you just cut down your cigarette intake by half, that will have a drastic impact on surgery, on major surgery.
Smoking's a funny one, right? I've never smoked, as in I've never smoked cigarettes.
Same.
I dabbled a bit with weed when I was younger. But I feel like if I'm out drinking, it's like a social thing, isn't it? But what I've started doing is if I feel like I want to have a smoke, I'll go and buy a vape and I'll buy one with no nicotine in.
Right.
So I'm like tricking myself. So I feel like I'm doing something. I feel like I'm part of the crowd and everyone's having a smoke, but I'm not taking any nicotine. I mean, I don't know what's in it. Don't get me wrong. Some sort of water vaporized.
Yeah.
But that's kind of my way of dealing with that, because it's a social thing. Most people don't smoke. They smoke when they're drunk.
It is a social thing. And
it's
that
like
is
a gateway.
That's it. If you think about vaping, right, at the end of the day, you are inhaling heated chemicals into your body, and it's reaching those sensitive mucous membranes and the delicate tissues which line your airways and your end airways, the alveoli, the little sacs at the end of your lungs, which are used for, oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange. Those heated chemicals irritate the linings of your airways. And that chronic low-grade inflammation can contribute to chronic lung disease, interstitial lung disease, lung collapse, a number of things.
Is vaping just a modern shisha? Shisha's been around for years. Similar, aren't they?
I guess in a way, but I feel that
Shisha a bit more natural.
I don't know what to say. Like I don't know. Like
it feels the same. You're sucking it. It's bubbling, and then a load of smoke's coming out.
Listen, when I was younger, when I was in school and stuff, we sort of after school, I've done a couple of, I've gone with friends and had a few tokes of shisha, and I've done that before. And I don't do it now. I've not done it for over a decade, and I don't ever think I will. But yeah, I think in some respects, I mean, also shisha is not good for you. Have we, and like you say, oh, we've done it for centuries and it's a long tradition, but tradition is not always a good thing.
No, true.
We don't know. We don't know the impact these has on these people. In Arabic countries, it's very popular to do shisha. Mm-hmm. Do we know what the state of their lungs are for a chronic shisha smoker in their 70s or 80s, if they even make it to 70s or 80s? Mm-hmm. Probably not in a great state.
I wanted to ask something, bro. When we spoke about earlier before we started recording about steroids and TRT and all this kind of stuff. And now, my old man, I used to take loads of protein shakes when I was young and smashing the gym, right?
Yeah.
And he always used to say to me, son, stop drinking these protein shakes. You don't know what's in them. A typical, right? I was like, Dad, what are you talking about? It's just whey. He was like, yeah, but, cigarettes were deemed healthy once. Coca-Cola had cocaine in it once. There's not enough research. It's not been around long enough. What's your views on like these whey protein supplements?
Yeah, I think unless you've got, lactose intolerance or some sort of dairy allergy or intolerance, I don't see any problem with protein supplements. I think, they're a useful adjunct for many people's training. It's a convenient source of protein and allows you to get more protein if you're muscle building. And I think generally, the average person.
Take protein supplements?
I do. I used to take whey years ago, but I found it did sort of upset my tummy sometimes.
Yeah.
So I switched to pea protein.
Yeah.
It's a lot nicer.
I'm using a vegan protein.
Yeah.
Now. Nice for my stomach.
Yeah. I'm not vegan. I eat meat and all sorts, but yeah, I find it a lot more pleasant on my stomach and bowel symptoms. I think it's very useful. Like if you want to hit, whatever, like I'm trying to, get back into the gym and really hitting it. So I'm trying to hit like 150 grams of protein plus a day. So, having 2 protein shakes a day, which just adds an extra 40 grams, is convenient on days where I can't meal prep and get higher natural source of protein in my chicken and fish and whatever. It's very useful to have. I see no problem. And, it doesn't cause kidney damage or any of these things that people talk about.
You hear about, kidney.
Nah. In fact, in a small subset of patients with chronic kidney disease, it might cause some issue if you're, inhaling lots of protein, but it does not, for the average person, impact their kidney function in any way. In fact, I'd argue it can support kidney function if you're training and all of these things.
Yeah, it's interesting because I said to you, I was messing around with steroids when I was younger. And I was smashing in everything and anything I could find. Tren, Test, clenbuterol, tamoxifen, Dianabol, Anavar, all at the same time.
Like just a cocktail. Jeez.
Then I was going to Ibiza on 3-4 day benders with the lads. Then I'd, recreational drugs. And then you would, pull a bird, whatever, go home. Nothing would work. Then you would be taking some form of Viagra. And then you couldn't sleep. So you then take some form of Valium to sleep. So if you think of like that vicious cycle, I mean, I'm sort of 18, 19, 20 years old.
You're smashing it.
But then when I started having really bad, I thought I was having lower back pains from deadlifts.
Yeah.
Went to Dorchester Hospital as a specialist there. And it was my kidney function was fucked. Kidney and liver function. I was sat in a room, I shit you not, I remember I was with my girlfriend at the time, I was 20 years old. I was about 105 kilos, shredded like an Adonis.
Yeah.
And everyone else in the room was over 70 because this room was for like kidney and liver functionality.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, what the fuck am I doing here? And basically the doctor was, they first put it, I didn't tell them I was taking these steroids, right?
Yeah.
I didn't tell them I'd been to Ibiza, and it's a GP, so they're not necessarily that in depth in all the information. So they put it down to me having 600 grams of protein a day. Because obviously
600 grams.
Yeah, because I was told with steroids you can synthesize more protein.
Wow.
Is that true?
I don't know. No, I don't think
what bodybuilders say.
Well, listen, the more muscle you have, your requirements will go up in terms of muscle protein synthesis and your capacity.
Yeah.
But 600 grams seems like a pretty ludicrous amount.
It was huge. It was all basically, all I ate every day was basically just like boiled turkey and broccoli, basically. And the kidney function thing's funny because they at the time said to me, it's down to your protein. It's only later on when I said to them, look, I've been doing X, Y, and Z. They were like, okay, whoa, hang on a minute. And it's completely back to normal now. Like I'm optimum levels. I said to you, I've been on TRT for 7 years because I basically shut down my natural production.
We're taking tablet steroids as well?
At the time
oral steroids? Yeah, at the time.
At the time, Dianabol and Nanovi, oral, yeah.
So you see, when you...
And some of them are really toxic. Like Dianabol was very toxic.
When you take oral steroids, it is partially metabolized in the liver and processed in the liver, so it can upset your liver function.
So that could have been that.
Injectable steroids are less likely to have the systemic effects of affecting your liver to that same degree as oral.
Also, I probably wasn't fair on the GP. If you're drinking loads of alcohol, not sleeping for 3 days, partying, on top of all of that.
Jeez.
But as I said to you, I've been on TRT for seven years now. I have 6 monthly blood tests, and I'm pretty fucking optimum, to be fair. Every time, like I'm pretty good. The only thing every now and then is red blood cells are sometimes a bit high. I donate blood twice a year. Some of that is hereditary from family because there's conditions that my grandparents have died from and stuff. And some of it I read online is down to putting testosterone in.
Yeah.
Do you know much about TRT?
Basics. I've not kind of gone in depth into it, but in terms of side effects, that is something, I'll sort of, it can have, again, because it's processed by your body, systemically, it can affect essentially every organ system, positively and negatively.
This is the thing, right? So with TRT at the moment, there's nothing out there that makes you come off it. You live on it till you die.
Yeah.
So you're injecting every morning into my stomach, sub-Q, and HCG to stay fertile at the moment because I haven't had all the kids I want. I haven't had any kids yet. But it does feel a bit weird. It feels a bit unnatural to keep putting something in your body. But I guess if I was diabetic, I'd be doing it. But it's not the same thing, is it?
It's the same as, I guess without it, you'd be in a testosterone deficiency.
I was in trouble without it.
So it's a medical condition to have you functioning at a normal physiological state. You're not trying to go super physiological.
I'm not enhanced. So I have friends that are completely natural that have got 5 or 10 more of whatever the grading is of tests than me naturally. And I'm injecting it every day.
Yeah.
So I'm not enhanced in the slightest.
So you see there, exactly. Like, I think you could argue, again, there is a huge crisis with steroid use in young men.
Yeah.
18-year-olds who maybe in the summer holidays want to get shredded. They think, and actually, do you know what?
Testosterone levels are at their lowest, though. I read somewhere. Is that?
It's difficult to say because how do we compare an entire generation's testosterone to testosterone 100 years ago? We don't have the data from 100 years ago. Now, if you ask me, are there factors in our lifestyle right now which could potentially lead to the hypothesis that our testosterone on average is lower now? Yeah. We're probably sleeping worse now than we're ever before. We're consuming more ultra-processed foods. We're living a more sedentary lifestyle.
Mobiles.
Yeah, there's factors which are affecting our testicles potentially, like other ones I've mentioned, which can lower the testosterone, yes, and, drug use, all sorts. But I don't know if we've got the data to say it's much lower now. I don't know, because...
I remember reading it somewhere, as in, I don't know how true it was, but someone was saying that it's at an all-time low.
Yeah, it's
and then you've got the
difficult to say.
conspiracy theorists talking about plastic water bottles and
I'm sure that contributes.
Tap water and all sorts having estrogen in it or something. Is there any?
There was something I read that the sort of microplastics and exposure to all of these plastics, which increase estrogen and decreased testosterone, and actually it decreases the anogenital distance in fetuses, in male fetuses, which basically means that, you could be born with smaller penises because the plastics related to the
What?
plastics. Yeah. I mean, because exposure to testosterone in the womb, that fetal exposure to testosterone, is what drives those, male characteristics, the predetermines the size of the penis, all these sort of things. So, and we know now that microplastics can get anywhere. There's a recent study which suggested in a study from China that they found microplastics in the human heart during heart surgery. Before that, they found evidence of microplastics in the placenta of pregnant women.
Wow.
So there's fetuses, unborn, babies being exposed to microplastics in the womb. It's pervasive. It goes everywhere. Now, what are the effects of microplastics? They're not going to be good. Microplastics are not going to be beneficial in any way. They probably will be detrimental on disrupting the endocrine system, hormone levels, our neurology, but we don't know clinically what they actually do long term. And that is in a evolving area of study where, what does it do to our bodies, our microbiome? We don't know, but it's nothing good.
Be interesting to see what the outcome of that is in 5-10 years. Bro, the NHS is obviously under immense pressure. I've got some stats here. In 2010, the NHS waiting list was around 2.5 million. Supposedly, it's now 7.6 million. Why do you think that is?
Well, I suspect COVID had something to do with it. There were lots of delays in terms of patients having their routine operations. So a huge backlog from COVID. And, that's one thing. Another major factor is just having the staff, the resources and the staff. We don't have enough surgeons to carry out all these operations in a timely fashion.
Why, though? Not enough new ones coming through? And if they're not, why?
I think, there was a interesting statistic from, I think it was the British Medical Association, the BMA, which kind of, represents doctors in some capacity. And looking at trainee doctors, so you do your first 2 years of general training and then you go into specialist training. I think in 2017, the number of junior doctors who were progressing into specialist training in 2017, I think it was something around 70%. Over 2/3 were progressing.
Mm-hmm.
And in 2022, it was down to 1/3 or less progressing into specialist training because of people being disillusioned with the NHS and the training environment. So you're not getting people now compared to before progressing into those specialist surgeons.
Got
So
you.
that is the bottleneck. That's the rate limiting step. How do we stop attrition of staff going to Australia, going to America, Canada? How do we keep them, in the NHS?
Is that a mixture of salary, working conditions, X, Y, Z, all to put together? Do you
Everything
think?
you've mentioned, and you've mentioned the two main things: working conditions and pay. Currently the junior doctors have been striking for pay restoration.
It's just such an important job, isn't it? Like such an important part of our infrastructure, and I don't think we really realise in the UK how lucky we are with the NHS. I don't think we really do until you have been to a country that doesn't have it.
Yeah.
My auntie, we went to a wedding in Turkey and her liver failed when we landed. She lives here.
Wow.
And until we showed a bank balance of a few $100,000, they didn't send the ambulance to pick her up.
Jesus.
Because there's no NHS. So they're worried if they pick her up, she's going to be stuck in a bed. No one's going to pay for it.
And then they'll be committed to treating her.
Yes. So like the NHS, I think was originally formed, after the war.
Yeah.
It's formed for, if you use the NHS for what I understand it was formed for, which was emergencies, it's incredible. Emergency procedures, it's incredible.
It is, yeah.
If you want to use it for optimization of your skin or your tits or your erectile, whatever it might be that is a bit more optimizing as opposed to like a life or death, everyone then moans it's slow, but it wasn't really set up for that.
It wasn't set up for that. And I would say even going beyond that, there's a lot of chronic conditions where we sometimes don't deal with it as well as we should or could. For example, just as you mentioned, if you break your leg today or you're stabbed in the abdomen and you need emergency surgery, it's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get it done ASAP with the best leading staff arguably in the world.
Yeah.
Right? And your aftercare will be fantastic and you'll be discharged and you'll be back to normal, hopefully within, a few weeks. Now, if you have ADHD, if you've got chronic mental health issues, if you've got chronic gut issues, if you've got chronic back pain, it's sometimes ill-equipped for that from a outpatient point of view where it's not an emergency. You've got chronic back pain, you've lived with it for 10 years, you've got fibromyalgia, it's not an emergency. You are suffering at home in silence. But because it's not an emergency, it sometimes can take weeks or months for you to get an appointment, get a follow-up, get some treatment. And you go around in circles, seeing different specialists, and you're still nowhere at the end. I understand the frustration for patients who go through that thing because, I deal with some of these patients who see me after being referred 9 months ago by their GP for something, and then they eventually see me, and they're a lot worse than when they were referred. They've deteriorated in that 9 months. And then I see them, and they're frustrated. I understand that. And the NHS doesn't have the resources or capacity sometimes to deal with all these things. And that is where it's kind of let down sometimes by the financial structure.
For sure. There's pros and cons, right? Because also when you go fully private, so again, I'll refer back to Turkey just because I've had experience there. If you go in with a gut pain, they immediately want to put you under the knife because you've got to pay.
Yeah.
So the pro and con of here is, when you go here and you go, my stomach hurts, I go to a GP and they go away for 3 days. If it still hurts, come back. As frustrating as that is, sometimes you just needed to fart.
Yeah.
like if you went to Turkey and said, my stomach's been hurting for a week, they want to get you under a blade.
It's not incentivized here to be like, okay, we need to do something now.
We need to cut him open. Like there's none of that.
I see pros and cons of every system. I saw a patient in clinic who had gallbladder problems and the referral letter said that they've got gallbladder issues. So in my mind, I was like, okay, so they might need an operation to remove their gallbladder if they've got gallbladder issues. The guy came to me and says, no, I've already had my gallbladder out. I said, oh, okay, you don't need to be here. And he just told me the story about how he got done. He traveled to northern Cyprus, the Turkish part of Cyprus. And he saw a surgeon in the hospital. They did an ultrasound. They saw gallstones and they took his gallbladder out. He paid £200, right? And it was all fine. It went really well. He left the hospital the next day and he saw me and the wounds were all nicely healed 3 weeks down the line. I was like, okay, this appointment was a waste of time for you. You've done what we would have done anyway and you've done it much quicker. You would have been waiting probably months to have your gallbladder out here. Yeah. So well done. And he paid £200 for that. So with repeat appointments... You wouldn't get
out of bed for that, would you?
Oh, Jesus. Can you imagine that? No, but to be fair, privately... If you paid for a gallbladder operation here, I don't know how much the patient would charge, but a private gallbladder operation, the surgeon would probably make around a couple £100 here.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is not much, is it? If you think about it.
It isn't a lot. Actually, I didn't realise it would be as low as that. Yeah. So I think they'd probably charge a few grand for it.
What goes in your pocket is probably about a couple £100 as a surgeon doing a gallbladder operation. It's pretty appalling.
This is the mad part, right? So, we recently celebrated the 70th anniversary of the NHS. Do you think it's going to be here for another 70 years?
I wouldn't be around to see it if it is.
As someone that works within it and kind of probably hears and sees things that we might not, because we see a lot of propaganda, but...
It's difficult to make predictions on a decades-long scale, but I would like to think in some capacity the NHS will exist in 70 years. Will it exist in its current form? I don't think so. Because even now, if you look at 70 years ago, the NHS has improved and deteriorated in some capacity, you could argue, in terms of maybe I don't know. It's changed so much. I think it might be increasingly privatized and it seems like it is in many facets. There's a lot of stuff being done in private hospitals, which usually was done in the NHS.
Yeah, I've booked in. I've got a nose op October 20th.
Okay.
I've got a deviated septum.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So I can only really breathe out of one nostril.
Yeah.
So I tend to mouth breathe, which since COVID and I've got into all these buzzwords like breath work and stuff like the rest of people, I've realised it's, I need to be able to be breathing properly. I also started jiu-jitsu since COVID and if someone does that to me now, I feel like I'm drowning because I can't physically get enough air in.
Yeah.
So it's a very easy way to get me tapped.
Really? So that's the thing, that's a move in jiu-jitsu where they cover your mouth. Oh, right.
You get a lot of that. You've got a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
And I started swimming after COVID as well in the sea. And again, I felt like the breathing needed to look at. I didn't know what was wrong with it. I just went to the doctors and said, my nose is...
Yeah.
So when I go like that, I can breathe. It's lovely.
Yeah, when you pull it back.
Yeah.
When you open up.
That I'm going private through PMI because otherwise it was going to be months and months. And they could see me tomorrow if I wanted.
that is the advantage of private care. I guess you have it immediacy to it.
Yeah. Bro, before we finish, there's a couple of things here that I think are either from your book or your videos.
Yeah.
One is, why should you never hold a fart in?
Well, in very simple terms, if we look at it mechanistically from the science of it, right, the fart literally will dissolve into your blood. So you'll have fart in your blood.
Is that a problem?
No. And then eventually that blood will circulate to your lungs and you'll breathe it out.
Ugh.
In some capacity, it may not be the same pungent odor, but
I was going to say, so every now and then if someone breathes out and it stinks a bit, that could just be their fart.
Well, the thing is, like, if you think about the intestinal tract, right, it's just one long winding pipe. So if the fart didn't dissolve into the intestines and into the bloodstream, or didn't come out the other way, it could conceivably make its way up the top end. So people often who are chronically constipated and, have gut issues may have issues with their breath as well, because the mouth is the first port of call to, the depths of your bowels as well.
I'm with you. That makes sense. And then the other one was dangers of plucking your nose hair.
So, I mean, plucking your nose hairs, a lot of people do it, but theoretically it can cause microabrasions there and infection risk. So I wouldn't. You can trim it; it's fine. But your nose hairs plays a role in trapping dirt and microbes and things like that. So it's there for a reason. If you want to trim it, if it's dangling out, yeah, fine. But you don't want to be doing a lawn mowing in there.
You know when you go to like the Turkish barbers, they put the fucking wax in.
I've had it done before.
And then they rip it out. Oh my! Your eyes are watering.
When it's naked, when all the nose hairs are gone, you feel like it's super smooth. Like you know that feel like accidentally once, right? I've like, when, I don't know, you're in the bath or whatever and you shampoo all of your body, occasionally that soap or shampoo, that components of the foam goes into your like nether regions.
Yeah.
And once you've like, when you've showered and you wipe down, it feels like super lubricated there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It feels like super smooth. But that's a really disconcerting feeling.
Yeah.
Like I don't want my butt cheeks to be that gliding. It's weird. It feels like something there. And the same feeling in the nose. When all your nose hairs goes, it feels like something's always running. Like,
yeah.
I don't like it.
I completely get it.
I want some hair.
Yeah.
Try some friction.
Well, we got a bit of it anyway, you and I.
Yeah.
What's next for you, bro? What you got planned?
What have I got planned?
Have a book or something? What you got? Any?
I got the book coming out, and really, I want to. I started a podcast. I'm sort of 12, 13 episodes into my podcast now, which is, I'm a baby podcaster.
Yeah. Same as me.
Yeah, really?
I'm 20. This is 27.
Oh wow, okay.
27. Yeah.
So, I feel I really want to, I love doing that because it's longer. It's 30, 40 minutes long, the chats, so you can get to more the nuance and detail.
Yeah.
And I really want to, because it's like a health-based, science-based podcast, right? So I've got like people talking about health stuff on there. And I really want to take that to the next level. And I see my future as like doing those podcasts for a very long time, as long as I'm interested in social media. And that's what I really want to do. That's next for me. I really want to take that to the top level. Not like it's never going to become a Joe Rogan type thing, but, get it up there as like a go-to health podcast.
Yeah. It's good fun, I think. Like, podcasts for me, everyone's like, oh, how you doing out of it? And I'm like, well, it costs me money. I don't do out of it. It does me. But I enjoy it. It feels like a bit of a therapy session. It feels like a bit of an education session.
Yeah, it's nice.
The guests are all weird, wonderful, different, cool stories.
It's nice talking to people.
Yeah, I enjoy it. Bro, thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Thank you very much for having me, Ty.
Mate, I know you have to come down. Mustafa. Don't tell everyone that. No one knows it.